here with Amory Lovins of the Rocky Mountain Institute. We just missed you in Kyoto a couple months ago, and when we arrived, and certainly I'm sure you had the same impression, there was a lot of gnashing of teeth and anxiety about how could we possibly meet a 6% cut in CO2 emissions and greenhouse gases. Do you have any comment? What was your take on the whole discussion at
Well,
Kyoto?
you were probably inadvertently listening to one of the 169 lobbyists from something called the Global Climate Coalition, spearheaded by the coal industry, to try to pretend that either there isn't a problem or if there is, it's too expensive to solve it. They forgot a rather important point, though. It's cheaper to save fuel than to buy it. Therefore, protecting the climate by using fossil fuel a lot more efficiently is not costly but profitable. And since it's profitable, it can be done in the marketplace through things that are rather good for us, like innovation, competitive advantage, economic opportunity. It's really about profits, not costs. Now, that message is starting slowly to sink in, and we get calls from a lot of industries, major chemical companies and so on, saying, gee, now that there will be a trading scheme whose framework was agreed at Kyoto to reward people for emitting less carbon, how can our company make money off that? And I think the race to a more efficient and climatically benign economy is definitely off and running.
Now we had, to bring it back down to Hong Kong here, we had a meeting, a tour last week of the power plant on Lamma Island. Huge power plant, as you're probably aware, burns 3.5 million tons of coal every year. And they maintain that demand-side management wouldn't work here, that it's not profitable for them to be doing those energy efficiency measures. It's more profitable for them to project 4 or 5% growth and to build more power plants.
That was largely true under the previous regulatory arrangement called the Scheme of Control. However, they have negotiated now a new agreement that lets them actually get rewarded for saving energy, not only for selling more. And I think this will gradually move more and more in the direction of letting the utility keep some of the savings it creates for the customers whenever it can save electricity cheaper than making it. That's a very sensible arrangement because it means whatever gives you lower bills will give them more profits. So your interests are aligned instead of opposite. That sounds like a good idea. We've done it in about 8 of the United States, and it does have a miraculous effect on utilities' behavior.
You're talking about really changing a culture also, because I mean they're so used to building more power plants and selling more and more.
Oh, they're resigned to not building any for a long time. They have a lot more than they need. They're just getting used to the idea that it's cheaper not to run the ones they have than to run them. And if so, then they shouldn't run them no matter how many they've got.
So are you saying that today it's cheaper in Hong Kong for Hong Kong Electric or CLP to be selling efficiency measures rather than selling more kilowatt hours?
Very much so. It's a lot cheaper to sell or even give away efficiency than even to run existing power stations, even if building them costs nothing. Of course, if you design buildings properly in the first place, then they save, say, 3/4 to 4/5, even more of their electricity, even 90% in some cases now. But they cost less to build because you don't need all that expensive mechanical equipment to keep them comfortable when they're more efficient in the first place.
But you're saying these things, and they don't seem to be part of the conventional wisdom, so to speak.
Well, we have some pretty perverse incentives in place. Architects and engineers here as elsewhere are paid for what they spend, not for what they save. Utilities are rewarded for selling you more electricity and penalized for cutting your bill. People are very good at responding to exactly the incentives you give them. So if you reward the opposite of what you want, you'll get the opposite of what you want. Governments are slowly waking up to this, though, and starting to get the incentives right. And then it gets a whole lot easier. We did a paper for the Kyoto Conference called Climate, Making Sense and Making Money, which codified about 60 obstacles to using energy in a way that saves money, and then showed how to turn each obstacle into a business opportunity, each stumbling block into a stepping stone.
But do you see, for example, here in Hong Kong, that new buildings that are going up are meeting these kind of energy efficiency standards you're talking about?
New buildings here are not yet efficient, but I think they will get more so because the market downturn actually focuses developers' attention on things they hadn't really paid much mind to, about using the space a lot more efficiently, vertically and horizontally, because in Hong Kong they rent by the gross, not net square meter. And also operating costs are starting to become important when before they weren't. People were just building so fast and flipping the property to some other owner that they didn't care what it would cost someone else to run it later. Now they do, because the market's starting to get more particular about that as people trim their costs. So I think that market correction is a healthy development for getting property developers into more efficient designs.
Is it cost effective to be going back to all these old buildings and fixing them up, making them energy efficient?
There are some high quality properties. We're standing in one of them now that are really quite energy inefficient, and it would be very profitable to fix them up to save most of their energy. We've actually got experience of this in quite a few U.S. cases now, with broadly similar buildings and some in rather similar climates. And it's not unusual to save 3/4 of the energy with a payback time of just a few years. It's a lot better return than you can get any other way.
Now, how about air conditioning? One of the big energy users in Hong Kong is air conditioning. Can you talk a little bit about some of the innovations or changes that have happened for more efficient air conditioning?
We recently saved 97% of the air conditioning energy fixing up a California office, made it more comfortable. Instead of thinking of this as an air conditioning problem, let's think of it as a comfort problem. And you can extend the range of conditions in which people feel comfortable through, for example, better windows that let in light but block radiant heat, called super windows, which are not yet made in Hong Kong but are made now in Thailand. And a friend of mine who used them in his house there saved 90% of his air conditioning energy with no extra cost.
Just by changing the window?
Yeah, because that was a new house, but it turned out that the extra cost of the windows and other efficiency measures was balanced by the value of avoiding 90% of the air conditioning capacity. It worked out the same, and it's much more comfortable. Then with, for example, new kinds of office chairs where you sit on a ventilative net or mesh instead of insulating upholstery, you keep your backside several degrees cooler. The ceiling fans can give you 5 Celsius degrees of extra comfort range. And you start adding it up and it actually works pretty well. You get more comfortable. Well, then you can reduce the unwanted heat coming into the space by better windows and shading, by more efficient lights and office equipment and other stuff that releases heat into the space. So by those means, for example, we've eliminated cooling equipment entirely in California houses at temperatures up to 46 Celsius, and the house is more comfortable but costs less to build. Now, that's not a very humid climate like Hong Kong, but it's still a good indication. Then you can use a lot of passive cooling, ground coupling, ventilative, radiating heat away to the night sky. You can use alternative cooling like desiccant and absorption, evaporative. And actually, a method like desiccant plus indirect evaporative would keep you very comfortable in Hong Kong any day with a lot less energy than these refrigerative systems. So I think that would be a better choice. Then if you do have refrigerative air conditioning, which is common here, it can be made several times more efficient than it now is just by designing it better. And the capital cost of doing that is less than the way it's done now. And then you can improve controls. The top 10 or so-called smart buildings in Hong Kong were recently looked at by a friend of mine who found that none of the control systems actually worked as advertised. There's a lot of self-deception going on there. But better is design the building so it doesn't need fancy controls. It just keeps you comfortable by itself.
So do you have a sense that these things are catching on in Hong Kong, around Asia at all?
We're starting to get a lot of interest in meeting some very good design professionals here who are ready to do better stuff if the clients ask, or you're reaching clients who want better designers. And I think, getting them together is just going to happen quickly over the next few years. The property boom here was fueled by below market capital. Basically, it was better than free. It was below the inflation rate. People would pay you to take their money to build buildings with. So of course there was a property bubble, and now that we're approaching more realistic conditions in the property market, I think the developers and tenants have a much stronger incentive to use real numbers.
When we went to visit Hong Kong Electric last week, we talked to them about burning all this coal and the problems of acid rain, and they maintained that the volcanoes are a bigger concern in terms of acid rain. Have you heard that one before?
Yes. There's no accounting for what some people think. However, there isn't much we can do about volcanoes. There's a lot we can do about burning coal. It's cheaper not to.
Now, China, right next door, seems to be looking forward to building a lot more power plants, coal-fired power plants, nuclear power plants, which I know you've had a history of opposing. Do you have any interest or any experience talking with them? Are they
Yes.
starting to clue into these things?
China is strikingly similar in many ways to the United States in the early 50s. It has a strong nuclear, coal, and hydroelectric bureaucracy, but weak efficiency, renewables, and natural gas bureaucracies. And many energy decisions are made, as they were in the US in the 50s, based on bureaucratic strength and force of habit. So you get the sort of equivalent of the old elephant and rabbit stew recipe. Take one elephant, one rabbit, except it's the wrong way round. Now, I think that's going to change because they simply haven't the money or the time to keep on with the very slow and expensive deal of mining more coal, building more coal-fired power plants, building more rail to haul the coal, building more electric grid capacity. It's just too expensive. For half the cost in half the time with half the CO2, actually a quarter of the CO2 emission per kilowatt hour, you could do combined cycle gas plants by developing a gas industry. China has, by its own reckoning, half as much gas as coal, and they have a lot of coal. Some other experts think they have as much gas as coal. It doesn't matter who's right because there are East Siberian gas fields not that far from China, each bigger than the entire gas reserves of North America, and that gas will end up going east. We're starting to be three-way deals now between Russia, China, and Japan on building what will amount ultimately to an East Asian gas grid, just like the European gas grid that runs from Norway to Algeria. Now, that'll be a very good thing because you can use the gas twice as efficiently and with a quarter of the CO2, but cheaper and faster. That would also free up about 2/5 of China's winter rail capacity that's used to haul coal, which is a huge bottleneck to development because you can't move other stuff that needs to go on the rails. But besides gas, China has quite abundant renewable resources beyond the small hydro and biogas that have long been important in the rural areas. And China also has immense untapped reserves of efficiency. They've done pretty well as a start by pricing energy more rationally and shutting down some of the worst boilers. So they've already cut the ratio of growth in energy demand to economic growth in half, and they're in the process of cutting it in half again. Even more can be done if, again, they start rewarding utilities for cutting bills, not selling energy, and otherwise get the incentives right so that efficiency actually becomes profitable under the rules where people do the accounting.
Right. Anything else?
If cities were serious about reducing their energy usage and the profitability was put in the proper place, what sort of reductions could be made quite easily based on today's technology?
Like what?
Like what percentage of
Cities like what?
energy could be reduced? Well, I guess I'm interested in Hong Kong, but also North American cities. I don't know. Are they that different?
Not really. It's pretty straightforward to save half the energy easily, and over time more like 3/4 of the energy in existing buildings with very attractive economics. As you gradually replace them with new buildings, the savings get up around 90% and the capital costs go down. In all cases, the buildings get more pleasant, comfortable, and healthful to be in. And similar savings will gradually come about in our other energy uses in industry and transportation. In the United States, we've already cut $150 or $200 billion a year off the energy bill, but we're still wasting $300 billion a year. And the more we save, the more exploitable waste we find because we learn more, the technologies get better. You know, you can save twice as much electricity now as you could 5 years ago at only 1/3 the cost. And that statement's been continuously true for at least the past 15 years. The real surprise lately is we've discovered that in many cases you can make big savings cost less than small savings. We call this tunneling through the cost barrier. I'll give you a simple example from a carpet factory recently built in Shanghai by the American firm Interface. I introduced the Dutch engineer who was designing it, to some art learned from a Chinese engineer in Singapore, Mr. Lee, who is the efficiency wizard. And a pumping system in this factory had been supposedly optimized by the top Western firm, but when the Dutch engineer got through re-engineering it, it was using 1/12 as much energy. The pumping and motor equipment were 12 times smaller. How did he do this? Well, he used big pipes, which have a lot less friction, and small pumps instead of small pipes and big pumps. And you save a lot more money making the pumps and motors smaller than you pay extra for the fatter pipe. But the friction goes down as almost the 5th power of diameter, so that's a good deal. The other thing we did was lay out the pipes first, then the equipment. So the pipes are short and straight instead of long and crooked. So again, they have less friction. Now this is not rocket science, this is good Victorian engineering, but it was a 92% energy saving at less capital cost, and it all works better. Very similar opportunities are available throughout industry and buildings just by using a better design mentality. It's changing the mindware that's really the challenge today. And as we discover in writing our new book, Natural Capitalism with Paul Hawken, how these opportunities just pervade society, we're ever more astonished by the opening of the efficiency cornucopia. I guess you could call me a neo-cornucopian, because the opportunity to do more and better with much, much less is greater than any of us would have dreamed possible even a few years ago. And that's a good thing, because we've been, for 100-odd years now, making people in various industrial revolutions about 100 times more productive than they were. And that made sense when we didn't have many people, we didn't have much technology, resources and pollution-absorbing capacity seemed to be abundant. But now that nature is scarcer and people are more abundant, we have to keep using the economic logic that you economize on your scarcest resource, because that's what limits your progress, but apply it to new conditions of scarcity. It now makes sense to fire the unproductive tons, liters, and kilowatt hours and keep the people who will then have more and better work to do. The way to do that is advanced resource efficiency, wring a lot more work, 10 or 100 times more work out of the resources we've got. And that's going to give us better lives and a stronger economy, as well as a sounder environment.
Sounds like a good deal.
Thank you.
So